Welcome to the April 3rd edition of Who's Better Baseball, the podcast where we answer questions going around the league about who is better at baseball. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I have my co-host, Patrick Lyons, with me. We're going to get into 5 different topics today. We're opening things up with something that both of us are very familiar with our respective teams, bad starts. I'm a Mets fan, clearly, from the background. Patrick covers the Rockies for us. So we know a thing or two of bad starts this year. Is that right?
I'd say so. I mean, the Rockies do have a win, which, sorry, I know the Mets do not, but the losses that the Rockies have suffered and the run differential is historical proportions so far through the first week of the season.
It's been pretty brutal. So what we want to do here is look at all the teams that are off the rough starts and try to find the couple that might actually turn it around. There's one that we can look at that I think we can both just say off the bat are going to turn things around. Are we too concerned about the Houston Astros and their 1-5 start?
No, we were talking before we started going live that it's weird that this is only a 6 or 7 games into a season, and any other 6 or 7 game stretch, you just kind of brush it off your shoulder. But to start a year in this way, is a different thing. You have less concern about the Astros, obviously, because they've been doing it, pretty consistently for close to a decade now. But Joe Espada is the new guy in charge. Dusty Baker, his leadership, being able to get so many of those young guys integrated into the system. You got to see that at play the last few years, being a real steadying hand after the whole sign stealing scandal. And so now Joe Espada getting off to a strange start. His first big league win is a no-hitter. That had never happened before. So yes, they would probably be the one team I'd be the least concerned about.
Yeah, it is interesting that it's finally Espada's time and he gets off to such a rough start because he was up for, and felt like every year, 5 different manager jobs and always stayed in Houston, finally gets this one. But I imagine ultimately this team's going to settle in. I think there could be some concerns about how that rotation is going to end up holding up throughout the year. Justin Verlander, when's he going to come back, all that stuff. But when you're comparing the Astros to the other teams we're going to talk about, the Marlins, the Mets, the Nationals, the Rockies, the White Sox, the Athletics, and then the Giants and the Padres, it's clear they're in a completely different tier than the rest of these teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And they were a postseason team last year. I know the Marlins were, but yeah, the Astros are going to be able to figure out. They have enough of those guys on that roster. And again, who are they playing too, right? You got to consider the fact that it is the Yankees. You don't want them coming in your ballpark and sweeping you like that in 4 games in historic fashion. But even still, you could look and say, okay, that's a really good team. So, all right, we're gonna have to wait another week until we're over 500.
I'm sure they'll get there very soon. Let's look at the other playoff team because I think they've gotten off to a historically bad start. That's the Marlins. To go 0-7 on a homestand. They blew multiple games where they had 4-run leads. Just an absolute disaster in Miami. And we saw this coming, right? They went from Kim Ng to Peter Bendix. It felt very much like they were looking more at a long view now instead of trying to build off their playoff run and add to the roster in any way, really. Instead, they just bring in Tim Anderson, and their pitching before the season starts just gets decimated with injuries. They'd already lost Sandy last year with the Tommy John surgery, but to see so many other guys hit the shelf, it's looking pretty rocky for the Marlins. And at this point, I'd be surprised if they are anywhere close to being a winning team this year.
7 players right now currently on the injured list for the Marlins, 6 of them pitchers. And then you've got another pitcher that's actually on the restricted list right now. So yeah, they're throwing out 7 left-handed starters right now, which is rather unprecedented. One of those guys, a player who was one of their closers last year, AJ Puck. So, I mean, it's been very strange right there in Southern Florida. And, again, who are they losing these games against? The Pirates, which we'll get to in a little bit. But you would have thought you would have felt a little bit better by the fact that you didn't do much in the offseason because you're going to go out, have somewhat of a pillow to start your year. And it's absolutely backfired. And some of those losses have been really rough too.
It's crazy because you wonder about the impact of a manager, right? Skip Schumacher wins manager of the year, not to knock him at all, but it's just funny how, he's the best manager in the sport last year. It's amazing how incredible the Marlins did in those tight games. And then the luck starts to turn. The team's nowhere near as good. And Skip Schumacher does not look like the same manager, but it's obviously not his fault. It's just been a horrible start for the Marlins here.
Yeah, they've got to figure a couple of things out. And because it's not going to get any easier, obviously, in a very difficult NL East.
Yeah, for sure. And another team in the NL East is the Nationals. I want to loop three teams in here: the Nationals, the White Sox, and the Athletics, and even the Rockies too. All those teams have been sort of in rebuilds, or at least for the White Sox, are clearly in a rebuild now after trying to contend for years. Are any of those teams frisky enough that you could see them sort of jumping out and having a better year than expected? It's been a bad start for all of them. They each have one win. For the Nationals, it's a 1-3 start. Rockies 1-5. White Sox 1-4. Athletics 1-5. Any of them stand out as maybe being a little bit closer to 500 than we would expect right now?
No, no, none of them have been really that playing that well to be close to 500. The White Sox, I think they have a couple pieces that could be interesting, and they've got a lot of veteran guys that are probably going to end up getting moved at the trade deadline. They do play in the AL Central, so that's going to make it a little bit easier. So they could dabble in 500. The Nationals, we know they have a very good young core. Some of them have yet to even make the majors just yet. So, they might be able to take a step forward this year, but they're not going to really be in contention. The Rockies probably have the best roster of anybody that you just mentioned there, of that foursome. Not so much on the pitching side. They do have some really good young relievers that it's going to be a little while until you start to know their names, like a Justin Lawrence. They've got the bats. We just haven't seen that yet from them. And then Oakland, you have a team in which they are optioning players batting over 400 down to the minors and Esteri Ruiz. So the A's are really just doing all the wrong things right now.
Yeah, it's an absolute train wreck in Oakland. The one team of those that jumps out to me is the Nationals. When you get Dylan Cruz up, James Wood, if that happens this year, they could be a frisky second half team where maybe they never get anywhere close to 500, but they might play closer to 500 ball down the stretch. And they kind of did that last year. They had a good second half. To close off this topic, I want to look at the three teams in the National League. We've already sort of settled on the Astros as being the team in the American League that'll shake off this rough start. The Mets, the Padres, the Giants. Of those three teams, who can most break out of the funk? I will say for the Giants, they split their 4-game series against the Padres, and then they just lost the first two against the Dodgers. No shame in that. The Padres, they split against the Dodgers, they split against the Giants, and then they lost the first two against the Cardinals. And I believe when I started doing the notes today, they were winning the final game against them. So it's probably those two. Do you believe in my Mets at all before we focus on the Giants and the Padres?
Nope, not one bit. Unfortunately, yeah, they are the team that needed to get off to a good start and kind of make things interesting, at least a little bit, for that fan base that, as you know, has just been long suffering. Even when they go to the World Series and lose, that's kind of a season of suffering in many different ways. So they needed to get off to a better start to build some hope. But now that it's not there, that's going to be really hard to rebound. And so, yeah, Giants and Padres are two teams in the whispers of postseason contenders. They're probably a lot of people's like second or third wild card choice. I don't think that was really the case for the Mets. So Mets are definitely running a deep third place right there in that trio.
I agree. And I can't sit. If you want my Mets optimism, check out Locked On Mets Monday through Friday. That's where I'll traffic in some hope for the Mets fans out there. And I do believe that there is a world where this Mets team can actually be good, but I'm not going to sit here today and say they're in the same level as the Giants and the Padres. I do think those two starts have been more circumstantial. They've been playing their own division. They both played the Dodgers already. So I think we shouldn't get too carried away with their slow starts.
Yeah, and we know that the Giants are going to be getting some help in Blake Snell. Dylan Cease is still finding his way around San Diego and whatnot. So, there's going to be some time. So not the best start, but by far not the worst start for the Giants and Padres.
Absolutely. And they will be competing in the NL wildcard race, potentially with the Pirates and the Brewers, who are currently atop the NL Central. I think a lot of people believe that the Cubs are ultimately the favorite to win that division, but the Pirates are 5-0 right now. They have had a nice schedule to start, facing off against the Marlins and the Nationals, but still a 5-0 start for a team that really is trying to start to make their way towards contending. They didn't make the splashiest of moves this offseason, but they did round out their roster, and they do have a young core forming. Do you buy the hype at all with the Pirates right now?
A little bit. I do because, they got off to a really hot start last year. So they're going to learn from the fact that they fell off rather precipitously. And we talked about in our early preseason kind of predictions about which teams had the best offseason. And the Pirates were kind of, sneaky good. They really invested in the roster. In addition to the Mitch Keller extension, they brought in a ton of big league guys. Now, you're probably just throwing something at the wall, hoping something sticks. But so far that has worked. I have a buddy that was down watching an Indianapolis Indians game, and there are a couple names that are on that roster that you can look and say, hey, that could impact the 2024 big league squad as well. So they've got some names, Paul Skeens, of course, being one of them, the first overall pick in the 2023 MLB draft, that's going to allow them to increase their depth as guys start to fall off or struggle or get hurt. So it's kind of for that reason, I think the Pirates have enough of the boxes checked off to say, you know what, I think this could be sustainable for them.
Yeah, they when you get Skeens in the fold, that rotation's going to look a lot better. Right now, at least they have some decent names there where it's not there's not a day where I'm looking at it and say, okay, who are they running out there? They added Martin Perez and Marco Gonzalez, a couple of veteran lefties this offseason. Jared Jones looked pretty decent in his debut. Mitch Keller got the extension. So the rotation's in a pretty good spot. And when you get Skeens to put atop it with Keller, all of a sudden, I look at their pitching and say, all right, maybe this Pirates team can do something. You did reference, though, that rough start last year, and I want to go through those numbers real quick. Last year, they started the season 20-8. They then lost 7 in a row in 11 of 12. So they went from 20-8 to 21-19, and from 20-8 till the end of the year, they were 56-78. So that big drop-off last year has to be fresh in the minds of all these guys to not get too excited. And maybe that is the learning experience you need to then come into a following season and actually, be a little more consistent month over month.
Yeah, Derek Shelton's still a fairly new manager, so he's figuring some things out along the way as well. So learning from that experience last year. You also got to remember that, despite that good start, they did it without O'Neal Cruz, which would have been a much bigger factor later on when they did start to fall off. So now having him, batting leadoff, kind of doing that Aaron Judge thing. I mean, that's a potent lineup right at the top there for Pittsburgh. They really haven't had that much pop since, back in the early 90s when we were looking at Bobby Bonilla, Barry Bonds, Andy Van Slyke, to date myself as being an older guy there. So like Pittsburgh, I mean, if you're in the Steel City, you got to be feeling really good right now.
It's a great start. You did lose me a little bit with some of those names. I'm born in 95. So, I mean, I remember Bonds as a Giant. Bonilla, we're still paying him for the Mets. But yeah, the Pirates definitely have an interesting core right now, and it's getting better. And again, when they get Skeens in the mix, that's when they become interesting. To compare them to the Brewers, though, the Brewers started off 4-1. They swept the Mets. They then split their series against the Twins. They lost today, their first loss of the year. The Brewers are a team that was counted out this offseason. Everyone started looking at the Cubs. Everyone expects the Cardinals to default back to being the team that's always in contention in the Central. The Reds are the hot young team that everyone's looking at saying it's their time. But the Brewers have been the consistent team in this division as of late. And I got to watch them firsthand in that first series. They're playing great defense. They're quick. They're stealing bases. I got a lot of concerns about their pitching, but they're a good team, and I don't think we should count them out anymore. They very much can be in this playoff race all year.
Yeah, they're not doing what the Tampa Bay Rays have done because they still have some notable names. They went out and signed Rhys Hoskins. Christian Yelich, has had a nice little extension for himself. He's playing great. I think that's a big factor for their success, especially offensively. But the Brewers are kind of the National League version of Tampa, where I think we even said it before the season started. They're one of those clubs where, despite the fact you might not know who they plug and place at various positions, who's coming up through the minor league system other than, young superstar prospects like Jackson Churio, they're going to kind of figure out a couple things. And that's absolutely been the case for Milwaukee so far this season. So, they've got that injection of players that at a certain point now, you just have to give them respect and go, all right, I guess Abner Uribe is going to be the next big shutdown closer. He got some buzz about him last year. He's one of those guys, and it's not Craig Counsell running the show, but it is still a front office and it's still a squad of guys that were around the likes of David Stearns and Craig Counsell for so many years.
Yeah, it's it makes me wonder about the Corbin Burns trade, because you think about Burns back on this team, and all of a sudden you'd say, man, I mean, are they clearly the best team in the Central? With that deal, I think DL Hall becomes this piece that is so important to the Brewers right now, because I go through the names in that rotation: Freddie Peralta, DL Hall, Colin Ray, Jacob Junis, and Joe Ross. DL Hall's the only guy outside of Peralta that I say, okay, that's a potential frontline starter. And he's coming back from being a relief pitcher in Baltimore the last couple of years, where he never really got that full chance to be in the rotation. Now he's got it. He's in the number 2 spot in that rotation. They need DL Hall to be great. And I think my one concern about the Brewers is, how many innings can you get from DL Hall? So are they going to wear down the stretch, because they're just not going to have enough pitching to get through the whole season?
Yeah, their depth in the minors is good, but not great. Aaron Ashby is a player that has a couple years service time. Obviously, in the bigs, might be somewhat of a notable name. Wade Miley's on the IL right now. Trevor, don't call me Tyler McGill, also on the IL right now for the Brewers. So again, they've got some depth that can step up there, but it's certainly not the likes of someone like the Cubs that are, they've got a lot of options right there for their starting rotation. They even got a great start out of Javier Assad, their number 5 guy. So yeah, I think the starting pitching is kind of going to be, that area where they might struggle more than offensively. It's been the opposite in the past, right? But Freddie Peralta, Brandon Woodruff, Corbin Burns, those are all guys that came up all around the same time, almost out of nowhere. I think they're going to need to try to find that pattern again, to have some more youth injected into the rotation if they really are going to be players in this NL Central.
And then what they do at the deadline is going to be so fascinating, especially with Willy Adames, because it's your last year with him. You're probably not going to be able to sign him. If you're in the mix, do you just keep him for that final run? We remember a couple of years ago, they traded Josh Hader with more than a year of control. So I just wonder how they're going to walk that tightrope with how they're managing winning now and winning into the future. It's a 1-week sample size, but if you had to pick today, and we're going to come back and check this for sure, April 3rd podcast, we're definitely going to follow up on this at the end of the season. Mark it down somewhere. Who are you picking to finish with a better record this year? And are either of these teams a playoff team, the Pirates or the Brewers?
I think one of them will be, and I think it'll be the Milwaukee Brewers. I plenty of folks like ourselves kind of discounted the Brewers, but there were a lot of projection systems out there that actually had the Brewers as the best team. So it goes back to that, Tampa Bay Rays of the National League concept. So I think the Brewers are going to be that team, right? They've got the proven, more recent MVP superstar in Christian Yelich that has found his way. Pirates have their own, and Andrew McCutchen, obviously on the wrong side of 30 now at this point in his career. But I think the Brewers, just as an organization, they just continue to do it season after season. They find different ways to get things done. I think they probably will end up dealing a guy like Willy Adames. They have to be smart like that. If you look at the big picture of everything that went down with the Josh Hader deal, I think it also allowed them to get Williams Contreras, right, as a catcher. So it did lead to bigger and better things for their future. So that's not a sacrifice you want to make if you're in the hunt. But I think the Brewers are going to find a way, one way or another. But it would be nice to see the Pirates in the hunt once again, right? It's been about a decade since they've been to the postseason.
Yeah, it would be. It's interesting that you mentioned, the Hader trade, how that led to something. And also, if you're thinking about the Burns trade to give you DL Hall and Joey Ortiz, and Joey Ortiz could be the shortstop if you move Adames, and then maybe you trade Adames for a pitching prospect that you plug into your rotation in the second half, and you boost your rotation. Your lineup takes a hit, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but more control. It'll be crazy to see how this team looks by the end of the season, because so much can happen. I also agree that the Brewers are the better team of the two and the more likely to make a run. My last question to you on these two teams, though, is if the Brewers make the playoffs, are you picking them to win the Central still?
Who? I would pick them. I think the Cubs do have a better roster, but they've got a lot to overcome still, right? I mean, they really squandered an opportunity last year and just kind of stunk it up down the stretch, right? Their future was in their own hands right there, their destiny, and they squandered it. And so those things can linger for an organization sometimes, right? So Imanaga did really nice in his first start, a lot of swing and misses, 6 shutout innings, actually had a no-hitter at one point deep into that game against the Rockies. But I would still say that the money has to go on a team that has done it and that has proven, even with a different cast of characters, in the Brewers over somebody like the Cubs in the NL Central. What are your thoughts on that?
I think I'd probably lean Cubs, but I'm not overly confident with it. I think the one thing I would say about it is I don't believe there's going to be multiple teams coming out of the Central. So I think if either makes it, it's got to be winning the division. I don't see both of them making it. And the Cardinals are still a team I have my eye on. The Reds I'm curious about. But I do believe right now the best two teams in the division are the Brewers and the Cubs. And I would go Cubs for the end of the season because I just think that things might change at some point, and I don't know if I trust the Brewers pitching enough.
Yeah, hard to argue with that logic. Yeah, it's nice to actually be able to talk about the NL Central and not force it of like, all right, well, let's be fair to all the divisions. NL Central is low-key very exciting right now with all those young players. So it's nice to have that injection of excitement in that division.
Yeah, I know before the season we talked about kind of the top talent going to each coast, but I will say divisional races, the Centrals in both leagues are very interesting right now because it's just wide open, and that's always fun to see. Instead of you look at the NL West, it's just like, okay, the Dodgers won it. It's April 3rd. We can call that one. But let's move on to our next topic here. We're going to switch gears from team-focused stuff to players here. Two players that I think are very similar I want to discuss, which is Tyler O'Neill and Michael Conforto. Who will be better this year? Which hot start is real? These are guys who have had great peaks in their career, who have struggled the last couple of seasons, who are both impending free agents, have a chance to make themselves a lot of money if they can get a long-term deal. We're going to start with my guy, Michael Conforto. He went 9 for 23 to start the season so far. He's got 3 home runs, couple doubles, 2 walks to 7 strikeouts, and 25 plate appearances. He already put up half a win when it comes to F4, which is about half of what he did last year. He had a 1.1 F4 across the full season. You look at his last 2 years. So I'm looking at 2021 and 2023. There was a shoulder surgery in between that cost him 2022. But you could start to get to the point where Conforto is just a slightly better than average starter because it's pretty much the same season. 2021, 2023, 125 games played each year. 14 home runs in 1 year, 15 the other. RBIs around 55, average in the 230s, on base below 350 to 330 to 340 range, an identical slugging percentage of 384 each year. You remember in 2019, he hit 257, 363 on base, 494 slug, had 33 home runs. Is that guy coming back now? Is that what we're seeing now, removed from the shoulder surgery? Can he actually be, now still just 31 years old, a 4-win outfielder again? Or is this just a flash in the pan for the first week of the season?
No, I think it very much is. He's a guy that's confident, obviously, in his abilities. It's why he didn't settle for anything less and just ultimately decided to sit out for a year because the offers weren't there until he got kind of the right situation for himself. And so I think it is very believable that he's back, right? When you have a surgery like that, man, it can take multiple seasons for you really to rebound and feel good. And I think that's just a good setup that he's got in San Francisco at Oracle Park with that fan base, surrounded by a bunch of other guys, almost in a similar situation, really playing for their next contract. So I think that really bodes well for him. And, it would be nice for him to kind of get back to those days of yore when he was with the Mets and getting those qualifying offer on him.
I'll tell you, I going back to his rookie year, 2015, I live in South Florida, so I went to a game in Miami. That's a big ballpark. I watched him take BP, and he hit 5 home runs at BP in a row in the upper tank in right field, and I swear it was like he hit the same seat 5 times in a row. It was just this effortless swing, and that's when I first fell for Michael Conforto. This guy is going to be amazing. He's the Mets next, David, right? All that hope that you have as a fan. I would love to see him get back on track, and when you watch him connect on a home run ball and you see how pretty that swing is, it makes you want to believe he has such a smooth, like fundamentally sound swing and setup that's so simple that it doesn't make sense that he has struggled so much. And now I want to look here and see, where is he hitting in this lineup now is my question, because, does he have some protection with Jorge Soler? Where are they batting Michael Conforto? It's actually lower in the lineup from one of the games we're looking at here. He's got Tyro Estrada batting behind him. It looks like he's lower down the lineup. But it is a much better lineup that he's part of now, maybe less pressure than last year. So I do think there could be some staying power here. And also, there's a pretty definable injury to look at. I'm sure that shoulder was bothering him in 2021, and then you get the surgery. Last year, you're coming back from it after missing the entire season. Maybe that was just a year to adjust and shake off the rust. Normal offseason. I believe that this might actually be legit. I don't know if he's going to be 2019 Conforto again, but can he hit 20 plus home runs and carry a better batting average and on base percentage? I think that he can.
31 years old is not old by any stretch of the imagination. It's not 24, 25, and 26 years old, which is where, he had those prime years, like you said, 2017 through 2019, 88 home runs over those 3 years, OPS plus of 131 in a ballpark at Citi Field that is not very friendly to hitters. So for him to have been able to post that, was an all-star in one of those years. It is a walk year for him. He's going to be a free agent. So I think there's a lot to believe that his bat is finally coming around, that he's feeling so much better with that shoulder injury. It's, we kind of get numb to the fact that guys get hurt and then they're able to come back quickly and almost it have little to no impact on their production. And you got freak of natures like Shohei Ohtani. Yeah, I got Tommy John surgery, but I'm still going to go out and hit. Bryce Harper. Yeah, I'm going to go from the outfield onto the dirt and play first base. Like, those are some of the more exceptions to the rules. For every guy that goes that quickly, there's 10, 20 guys that never get back to the majors because of an injury like that. So Conforto somewhere in the middle there, but finally feeling healthy, finally looking good. And I think there's a lot to believe in what we've seen so far in this first week of the season.
Yeah, we'll see if he can keep it going. I mean, I know last year he had a couple good stretches too, so we can't get too carried away, but I'd like to see Conforto get off to a good start. Another guy that we're mentioning here that got off to a good start in a similar situation is Tyler O'Neill with the Red Sox, first year there after playing his whole career with the Cardinals. Another guy that's dealt with injuries the last couple of years, hasn't gotten on the field for 100 games since his big breakout season in 2021. He will be a free agent as well. He started the year 6 for 18, couple home runs, 5 walks to 3 strikeouts in 23 plate appearances. He too has nearly matched half of his F4 total from last year. 0.4 F4 in the first couple games last year, had a 0.8 F4 in 72 games. You look at those down seasons. Tyler O'Neill was hitting around 230, 310 on base, 400 slug. Never got to the 30 plus home runs he hit in 2021. He had 14 home runs in 2022, 9 home runs last year. WRC plus just under 100, so grading out slightly below average. But the thing about O'Neill is he's 28 years old, and we've seen some incredible stuff from him in that one season. It was only 1 year that's pretty much been his one full good year in his career, but he got MVP votes. He hit 286, got on base at a 352 clip, had a 560 slug, 34 home runs, 15 stolen bases, won a Gold Glove, had a 5.5 F4. So I think the ceiling might be a little bit higher for O'Neill. It's just a matter of, can he stay healthy this year and can he ever reach that again?
Yeah, 8th in MVP voting, kind of as you touched on in that big 2021 season. It's strange to think about the Cardinal way and how successful that's been in the past. And last year, obviously, that took a hit. This year, off to a questionable start. We'll kind of see where they end up. But I think Tyler O'Neill probably needed to get away from St. Louis just a little bit. He's one of those just change of environment candidates that just benefit from that. I don't necessarily think that's what a Randy Arozarena and a Dulce Garcia needed as former Cardinals outfield prospects. But for O'Neill, one of those guys that is getting benched for behavior and having issues with the manager. We've seen that with a couple guys now with the Cardinals. So I think just that change in environment is going to, bode really well. That right-handed swing, obviously with the Green Monster in left field there in Boston is really helpful. Getting the year started off in the right way on opening day. I mean, that's the guy you want to acquire. If you can play one guy for one game a year, you want Tyler O'Neill in your lineup and you want it to be opening day. You're going to win. You're going to get a home run from him there. So I really like his start too. And he's kind of in one of those lineups where the Red Sox, other than Rafael Devers, it's okay. Trevor Story, I think he's going to have a big bounce back year. Tristan Cassis, there's some guys who can hit in that lineup. But it's really going to take a 1 through 9 approach similar to the Giants before, we can really say like who's going to put the club on their back. So I think that maybe benefits and take some pressure off and say, you know what, I'm the hot hand today. If I'm not, today's your game, and you can kind of just sit back a little bit. So there's not maybe that same pressure as, hey, I'm the St. Louis prospect that was drafted and developed, and there are certain expectations on me. He's got a fresh start in Boston, and so far that's been really helpful for him.
Yeah, I think that does weigh on guys, right? When you come up and they hype you so much as the top prospect, and then if you're O'Neill and you actually live up to it for a season, that once you don't quite live up to it and you're struggling, that jersey gets really heavy. I'm sure it feels so much better to go to a different situation, whole different league. The league's got to adjust to him as well too, so I wonder if he's benefiting from that a little bit. So I think Tyler O'Neill's a guy that could really improve his free agent stock in a dramatic way. I think Michael Conforto, if he has a good season, he might get a nice 3-year deal. But Tyler O'Neill might be in a Cody Bellinger type situation where he pops off, and then next year we'll see who his agent is and how they represent him. But there might be that sort of debate of, okay, is he the guy that can finish top 10 in MVPs? Is he this incredible player that warrants a $25 million contract on a short-term deal or a long-term deal where he's potentially approaching 9 figures? I think there's a lot there that O'Neill can tap into. So I would say ceiling on O'Neill, and I think maybe the floor is a little bit higher on Conforto.
Yeah, we do want to say hello to Scott Boras, of course. Both Conforto and Tyler O'Neill, clients of the Boras Corporation. So Scott, thanks for logging in. Feel free to leave some comments there. We will get to them later on in the show. But you're right; those are 2 guys that are helping their value going into free agency. And O'Neill being 2 years younger, and the fact that you think of all those Scott Boras punts he likes to throw out there, with Tyler O'Neill's dad being former Mr. Canada, a bodybuilder. Like there are those stories, obviously, that you can build around in many different ways. And it'll be interesting to see, how much they are able to elevate that stock over the course of the 162 game season.
Patrick, don't you forget, Michael Conforto was the first player ever to play in the Little League World Series, the College World Series, and the MLB World Series. I think there was something like that was going on back in 2015.
Jason Varitek? How about Jason Varitek? Look him up.
Maybe him too. There was something there. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I know that was a big running storyline back in 2015. But I imagine this time next year, both of these guys will still be free agents, as Scott Boras is asking for 9 figures, and they just can't get those deals. Let's actually, to close it off though, if we're gonna through the name of our show, say who's better, who's your pick? Who's better right now, Michael Conforto or Tyler O'Neill?
Michael Conforto is the better pick right now. That's who I'm going with. I know he's 2 years older, so he's probably not going to make that same amount of money in free agency. But if we're talking about the 2024 season, I'm going with the former Metropolitan Michael Conforto.
Now we agree again, because how am I going to pick against Conforto? I can't do it. All right, let's look at, we'll go to another who's better situation. Shota Imanaga or Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Now, we could get carried away by one start here, but Imanaga looked unbelievable. And I know you were watching that whole start. 6 scoreless, 9 strikeouts against your Rockies. What did you see in that start from Imanaga?
Yeah, was incredible, right? Split finger sinking. Just a lot of swing and misses there for Imanaga against the Rockies squad that is very much pressing right now. You've seen it through the entire series with Chicago making 2 errors on 1 play, and it's been a rough go for the Rockies. But all credit to Shota Imanaga, making not just his Wrigley Field debut but his big league debut there, and was just incredible. I mean, he's the guy that started the final game of the World Baseball Classic. So, a little bit more of a veteran guy that might not have the same upside as a Yoshinobu Yamamoto, but still one of those steady hands. I mean, you can even think about, Tanaka coming over from the Yankees. He was a little bit older, but just was so incredibly steady that you could almost rely on this guy for another decade. I think he went back to Japan and continued to play because he's like, I've kind of proven everything I needed to in the U.S. I know I can hang. And I think Imanaga is going to be that same way, but of course from the left-hand side.
It's really interesting to compare these two, because this very well could be our NL wildcard, or excuse me, our NL Rookie of the Year race at the end of the year. These guys are both rookies, technically here, even though they've had decorated professional careers. They are major league rookies, and they're prominent on two teams that get a lot of coverage. And I think Imanaga could certainly develop the type of following and even maybe get some favor in voting just because of how cool of a story it could be. Like you can picture just from watching the electricity in an early series in Wrigley in the ballpark for that start, Imanaga on the mound trying to pitch the Cubs to an NL Central title and doing it kind of like Justin Steele did down the stretch last year where he looked so good until the very end, where Imanaga might not have the best numbers compared to Yamamoto. They might be close. Yamamoto might be slightly better, but who knows? Maybe Imanaga garners more favor just because it's this underdog story compared to Yamamoto, just another name on a star-studded Dodgers team.
Yeah, those narratives are legit. They are real, right? And there's so much hype around Yamamoto. I think at the end of the day, the numbers will really speak for themselves. But Imanaga was an all-time great as far as starting pitchers are concerned in NPB in Japan. Had a career ERA of 2.96 over there. So just posts every single year, and guys like that have a ton of value, right? And so you catch lightning in a bottle in that first year in MLB, and I think there's going to be a lot of voters that will notice that, and like you said, kind of say, hey, you know what, this guy's the underdog. You know what, I want to maybe give him a little bit more credit than the $325 million man in LA.
For sure. And I think when we're really getting down to who's the better pitcher, just because of the track record that Yamamoto has, there's a reason he got paid that. It's hard for us to say after one start against the Rockies, Imanaga's the better pitcher. I think he's maybe the better story. And I think he's also in some ways the better contract in the sense that the Cubs didn't take a lot of risk there. I mean, in fact, they got a pretty friendly deal with the way it's structured, where it's kind of short term. I think he can opt out, but there's vesting innings and stuff that'll make it a longer deal. And he might end up, being on the team for, I think, 5 or 6 years instead of, I think, the 3-year original commitment. But, Yamamoto, they attached themselves to him for a decade plus here. I don't think it's going to go sideways. I can't overreact to the start and soul, but I'm going to be really fascinated to watch these two throughout the year because I think this is the one year where Imanaga can hang with Yamamoto. I think Yamamoto will eventually settle in, and years 2 through 6, there's probably going to be no question who the best pitcher potentially in the National League is. He might be that good. But for this one season, Imanaga could very well challenge him.
Yeah, we've got an article coming out on Just Baseball later today about who the ace of the Dodgers is. And of course, Yamamoto's in that conversation. To your point, next season, Walker Buehler, does he come back in as a free agent, as well as Clayton Kershaw? Glasnow is going to be there. Shohei Ohtani, is he getting back into the rotation? Nick Frasso, their top pitching prospect, he's out this year. But there are so many options. And so imagine being someone like Yamamoto, and maybe you're the number 4 or 5 starter in that rotation. Who are you actually going up against? Talk about, having such ease when you go out on the mound. If you're going up against, again, a number 4, number 5 starter, maybe a converted reliever into a starter teaser, it gives you that much more confidence and creates a much more easier situation where, hey, if I give up a run in the first, maybe if I give up a run in the second, that's fine because my offense is going to be able to support me. But if you're doing it against, another team's number 1 or number 2 starter, that maybe makes it a little bit more difficult, and it's more of a high wire act right there. And maybe you get a few more losses versus wins. We know the wins and losses really aren't that valuable with starting pitchers anymore. But again, that is part of the conversation just a little bit when you get down into your ballot and you're trying to figure out who you're going to vote for Cy Young Award. So you're right. I think this year is kind of that one for Imanaga if he's going to be better than Yamamoto, this is going to be that year.
Absolutely. I think we're in complete agreement on that one. Yamamoto long-term better. This year, it's very much up in the air, and you teased it. So we'll get to our final topic here. Early returns have been pretty good for the converted relievers. It's a growing trend. Hey, you don't want to be a relief pitcher anymore. Go get starter money in free agency, or if you're Garrett Crochet, just say, I'm done with relieving. I'm committing myself this offseason to be a starter and win not only a job, but the opening day job in camp. there's three notable names that have done really well. And then there's AJ Puck, who we talked about earlier, who has not fared as well. But the guys we're looking at here is Garrett Crochet, and then two guys that you could have argued outside of Josh Hader were maybe the second and third best reliever on the market this go around in Jordan Hicks and Ronaldo Lopez, but they each sign in situations that allows them to start. So for Hicks, first time out, 5 innings pitched, did not allow a run, struck out 6, 1 walk, 3 hits allowed. That was against the Padres. For Lopez, 6 innings pitched, 1 earned run, 4 hits allowed, 2 walks, 5 strikeouts against his former team, the White Sox. Of those two guys, who interests you more throughout this season as being a long-term fixture, not just a couple starts in April and May, but someone that will be in their rotation for the whole year?
Man, that one's hard because I think both these guys have so much in common and still have such a big upside. I actually think Reynaldo Lopez is that one that has more potential to stick around in the rotation over the course of a full season. One of the things with Jordan Hicks, obviously, the deal that he signed, it was to be a starter, right? But we also know the Giants, they've got a lot of depth. Blake Snell's going to be coming back from the IL. They've got several other guys. Robbie Ray, of course, different situation where he's hurt, but he's going to get back into that rotation. They do have a lot more depth. And so I can see if everyone's clicking on all cylinders for the Giants, Hicks could be that guy that ends up going back to the bullpen and being a highly valued reliever. Does that mean, that the next 3 years of this deal, he's going to be a reliever? No, but I just think that this year, under these circumstances, and with Chris Sale in the rotation with Reynaldo Lopez, don't know how he's going to end up lasting if he's going to be healthy. So they're going to need him in that rotation. I really think Lopez has a better shot at sticking, and I think it just has more to do with the team situation than the individual himself.
It's pretty interesting because I would have pointed to the Braves' depth as far as still having Bryce Elder they can call on and other guys in the minor leagues. But at the same time, Max Fried has missed some time. He missed a lot of time last year. Chris Sale, like you mentioned. And if Lopez can continue doing what he's done, and I think he also has, I could be mistaken, but it feels like he has a little bit more of an arsenal, where Hicks, it's very much looking like a relief pitcher in the rotation, which is fine when you have 102 mile per hour sinkers that you can drop. But I do kind of see, I think you swayed me a little bit. I think before we started, I would have said that Hicks would stick because I look at that Giants rotation and I see Snell and Webb atop it, and I'm imagining, Hicks being a number 3, and he very well could be. But Robbie Ray is a guy that's kind of out of sight, out of mind. I could see a second half scenario also with the big innings jump, where you're right. Maybe the Giants say down the stretch, you know what, we can have you do 3 inning spurts and be this like super closer that can come in multiple times a week for us and really help us. Maybe it does make sense to convert him back. Whereas Lopez, you're right. Maybe the Braves' depth, as much as it seems like they have a lot of it, there are some real injury concerns atop that rotation.
Sure. You also have Alex Cobb as another one of those guys coming back this season for the Giants. Tristan Beck, who was, penciled in for the rotation early on in the year. A couple, really good pitching prospects, Carson Wisenhunt. So like there are those factors too of saying, hey, let's go with the hot hand. And, if Hicks is just, mediocre, then going back to that bullpen where, man, just being that flamethrower is going to play up, even that much more. So again, it's more situational based than it is about the individual himself. But again, if Hicks is lights out, you're not going to mess with that at all.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, the guy's sporting a sub-3 ERA and it's July. And I can say, you know what? We're going to take our second or third best starter out of the rotation. He'll keep that spot. It's the fact that there could be some variability where maybe he does get blown up a little bit, or maybe he does get tired as the season wears on. It is a big, big ask for him, especially for a guy that does have some injuries in his past. I think the best story of the season when it comes to the converted relievers has to be Garrett Crochet, though. 2 starts now. First one against Detroit, which seems like a pretty improved and sneaky good lineup. And then he goes 7 against the Braves and only gives up 1 run. He's got 13 innings pitched in his first 2 starts, the first being, of course, opening day. 16 strikeouts to 1 walk. And he's looking – it's almost like Cole Reagan's last year, where it's who is this guy? And then you watch a pitch, you're like, okay, that's ace stuff coming from the left side. It's been pretty amazing to watch Crochet early in this season.
Yeah, he's been a great story for a kid that was drafted in 2020 during the pandemic and then ends up making his debut weeks later, right? Making that big jump from the University of Tennessee to the White Sox. Has the injury, it cost him a season, ultimately just a bullpen guy, and the White Sox have been very irrelevant. So he's just not a name that you would really know unless you're a true hardcore. But you're right. I think that's a great story for him to go out there, have that success, kind of following a similar mold to a guy that the White Sox, were able to help develop in the past, like Chris Sale, because those have been the comparisons all along. And for him to finally get that opportunity now, and then to be so successful on top of that, I think is wonderful. So, being able to do this at 24 years old in his age 25 season, this really could be the start of the next young ace. Like it's crazy that he has all this service time, but yet this is really the first time he's getting an opportunity to do it in a big spot. So Garrett Crochet definitely has to be a name for people to really keep an eye on throughout the season.
And I mean, you can't even compare him to the other two as far as sticking in a rotation. He's there. I mean, the White Sox, he's penciled in every fifth day until, an injury pops up, because that rotation is very thin. They obviously just signed Mike Clevenger to give them another veteran arm to slot in, but Crochet is going to be atop that rotation all season. I'm looking now to check free agent in 2027. So they still got him for 24, 25, 26, 3 years of Crochet. A guy that, could be the potential ace of the future. Maybe they decide to extend him depending on how this season goes. Still only 24 years old. So I think for a White Sox team, we had a really good article by Elijah Evans that went up today, looking at 5 takeaways, or five things that would determine success for the White Sox this season. And it's a lot of trying to find these singular stories of guys that can be fixtures and can be pieces for you, because we know the White Sox aren't going to be contending this year. And there's some players like Eloy Jimenez, Yoan Moncada that you're trying to see bounce back to maybe sell. And someone like Crochet, it's all right. Can we find a fixture? It feels like that could, by season's end, still be the best thing about this season for the White Sox. And we saw it on opening day.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but when I was younger, and this is even true now, I would never go out to the ballpark because of an opposing position player. There'd be very, very rarely with an opposing pitching player, an opposing position player, get me out of the house to go to the ballpark. It was always the starting pitcher, right? That was always the guy that something electric can happen. So for Garrett Crochet being there, once every 5 days, I think that can be huge for the White Sox to get through what will probably be another 100 loss season, unless Steve. Garrett Crochet can have like a Steve Carlton season, and maybe be in the Cy Young Award conversation. And they could still lose 100 games like the Phils did that year, but even still, that's nice that the White Sox can watch Luis Robert Jr. and Garrett Crochet once every 5 days. They deserve at least that much for everything that they've had to suffer through the last few years.
Absolutely. I'm honestly wondering, now that you said the Cy Young, I'm like, I wonder what odds you could have got on Garrett Crochet before opening day and how much that has changed in a week, because I'm sure it's the biggest impact in odds when it comes to any of these futures. I don't even know if he'd even be on the board before the season, but he's probably on the board now. I mean, just a great start for him and a really cool story to close off our episode with today here. Go ahead.
I was going to say, he was so far off the board that he was on the Reliever of the Year award standings. Like, that's how far off the Cy Young Award, ballot he was, so to speak, for your odds. So, yeah, he's got to be now on the ballot because he's just been so dominant, very electric.
And you know what? Probably a future topic for us on who's better. Lefties in the American League now, with the Schoolboy in Detroit, Reagan's in Kansas City, Crochet, all in that division too. It's pretty rare that you see a division where it's all sort of headlined by a lefty ace. But that's a pretty fun conversation that we'll have at a later date here, because those are 3 arms that I think a lot of people are really going to be tuning in on. Like you said, I mean, it's kind of important appointment television now when you see someone that has that great of stuff to go out there and paint, and then you see them on Pitching Ninja with all the great clips that they can pull from these starts. Really fun to watch these lefties sort of pop up out of nowhere and really just provide a huge lift to their franchises.
Yeah, it's just like a left-handed swing just feels, more exotic. And it's really how much of that is just the fact that we don't see that as often. Same, I think, is true for, a left-handed starter. So definitely a future topic for another day. If there's any topics you want to hear from, obviously you can leave a comment in the chat on YouTube. We're also over on X at Who's Better BB. So let us know there, and we'll definitely have to get at it at a future episode this weekend.
For sure. We appreciate all of you who've been watching on the Just Baseball Twitter feed. We're going to go live for all of our shows moving forward. We're going to be doing Wednesday records, Sundays, probably around this time. And then if you want to watch any of the individual clips that we have, you just came in late and you missed the first part of the show, we'll be breaking up these videos and posting it on our Who's Better YouTube channel throughout the week. So you can see just kind of a bite-sized topic, as you can maybe watch all the different things that we talk about for each week. So,
and I'm not offended, right? If you say, I don't care about Tyler Neal or Michael Conforto, I just want to watch my Pirates. That's fine. Go ahead and just watch that clip. We are not offended one bit.
We appreciate the eyeballs wherever we get them, however we get them. So again, follow us. Tell them again where to follow us on Twitter there.
At Who's Better BB.
And you can find our personals on the side there of the screen. Find Who's Better Baseball on YouTube. And we will be back for a show on Sunday after the end of this week's slate of games here.